Hello, everybody. Welcome. How's everybody's PDC so far? Great. This is kind of it's a smaller group. We're in a huge room, though, so you guys are way out there. But I like to keep things kind of friendly and conversational. So if you want to come sit a little closer, if that's okay. If you're in the back, I'm just going to assume that you're working through email and all that sort of thing. I'm here to talk to you today about the Visual Basic IDE tips and tricks. I've given this talk a number of times in the last couple of years, and each time I've given it, it's been about Visual Studio 2008 and kind of giving you things that you can use right now. But now that we have Beta 2 out of Visual Studio 2010, this is going to be the Visual Studio 2010 edition of this talk. So we'll be showing some of the features that you can use if you're still using Visual Studio 2005. We'll show you some things you'll be able to use in 2008, but we'll also be showing you things that you can download Beta 2 and use right now today. So this is the 2010 edition of this talk. My name is Dustin Campbell. I'm a program manager on the Visual Studio Languages team, primarily working on the Visual Basic IDE. And I own a couple of other areas, such as IntelliSense and some of those things across the languages. I'm really excited to be here. The cool thing about this, I also get to make a little bit of an announcement, and that's with let me just move this up. That's with CodeRush Express. How many people have heard about CodeRush Express? Okay, great. So this tool is free, okay? Freely available for you. I'm going to be showing you a lot of productivity enhancements and various things in Visual Studio. But DevExpress has partnered with us to produce an Uber tool that supports both Visual Basic and C# that's available for Visual Studio 2008. So some of the features that I'm going to show you in 2010, if you're just chomping at the bit and you can't use 2010 yet, but you're on Visual Studio 2008, you can download this tool and take advantage of some of those features in your development workflow. But to announce it, the announcement I want to make is that we've just sealed the deal with these guys, and they're chomping at the bit, and they're ready to produce something for Visual Studio 2010. So if you used Refactor for Visual Basic, that was also produced by DevExpress, that's been rolled into this tool. Okay, so there is no more Refactor for Visual Basic. There's just CodeRush Express, and it's fantastic. And eventually, we'll be seeing it for Visual Studio 2010 as well. So I want to talk about three themes that we in the Visual Studio Languages team have kind of made investments in when we've looked at your productivity. So modernizing the IDE is one of the things that Visual Studio 2010 is really all about. So to take the IDE, which has been around for years and years and years, and really to take it forward into the future. To take a lot of the IDE and move it over to managed code. So in Visual Studio 2010, the editor and the shell, meaning all the document windows and tool windows and those things, are all now written in WPF. So that gives them the opportunity to do some things that we never had before, where in previous versions of Visual Studio is built in native code, and it's very difficult to make some of the advancements in user interface and productivity that we can do now with WPF. So we've made a lot of investments in that area. We've also made investments in deep insight, so to be able to explore your code, to understand it, to make sense of the things that are in front of you and staring you in the face. Maybe that's just trying to absorb a project for the first time and understand what you're looking at, or maybe you're in debugging and you're trying to make sense of some crazy bug and figure out what's going on. So lots of investments in deep insight, and then speed to solution, which is about really just allowing you to develop faster. A lot of times this is in the code editor where we're making enhancements to allow you to generate code quicker, or to allow you to type code more quickly, to find the things you're looking for more quickly, but to essentially to get you to what you're trying to do much, much faster. Okay, so the way this is going to work is I'm going to do, really two demos. There'll be a big demo, and I'm going to show you a lot of things, and we'll see a lot of new features, and then we'll come back and we'll have some slides to summarize that. So we're going to spend most of this. That's pretty much it for the slides. Okay, so we're just going to spend the rest of our time in Visual Studio 2010. So let's get started here. All right. So this is Visual Studio 2010 Ultimate. I have Beta 2 installed, I swear. This is not some special private build. So any of the glitches or performance, I haven't had any problems with it. So if anything happens, it's the real deal. First I want to mention is the start page. So we've taken the time in Visual Studio 2010 to produce a new start page. It's really a portal or a jumping off point for information. So this first page right here, this first tab, Get Started. Now we have jumping off points for Windows development, cloud development, Office, all of these various things to get you started and get you working. And then furthermore, if you want to go further beyond that, then we have areas for resources. And in previous versions of Visual Studio, the start page was primarily just a big RSS feed that gets you the latest news from the VB Dev Center and some of those locations on the net. And you could still get that if you so want. You can go to the latest news tab, and then this will persist when you come back. So the next time you load up Visual Studio, this will be the tab that you selected will be there. Now, a couple other goodies on this start page that you probably want to know about. So first, the recent project section, you can now pin projects. Okay, so if you have a project you want to stay up all the time, and maybe you work on like 10 projects and it keeps falling off the bottom of the list, you can stop that from happening. Yes, that's an applause point. It's amazing to me. So, but also if you right-click in here, you can remove it from the list. Yeah. You guys can clap for bug fixes. That's okay. That's cool. Thanks, Steele. And then one other really sweet gem on the start page is this checkbox down here. Close page after project load. So if you get irritated by the start page just hanging around, it's always there, check this box. Then when we open our project, it goes away. So that's awesome. Okay. Next up, I'm going to open a file. I'm not going to go to the Solution Explorer, though. I'm going to use a new feature in Visual Studio 2010. There's a kind of analogous feature in CodeRush Express for 2008 if you choose to install that. And that's a feature we call Navigate To. It's primarily, it's named appropriately. It's primarily for navigation. Keyboard shortcut is Control Comma. And we chose that just because we're hoping that people will use this a lot, and it's right there. It's right there next to the space bar, the Control key and the comma key. And I can just start typing here. Okay, and it immediately fills up with symbols and files for my current solution. And if I want to keep on filtering that, I could put a space and add another word. I could even do some interesting things like if I was a power user and I knew exactly what I was looking for, I could type the first capital letter in each part of the Pascal cased words there. I could say like game, card game, image, extension like that, and I can match using the capital letters in the word as well. So we're gonna go to the card, and this right here, what we're seeing in front of us is the brand new WPF text editor. So no longer is there a native editor in Visual Studio. It is now managed code underneath. It is put together with MEF, and it's an amazing sandbox. We haven't taken a ton of advantage of it in Visual Studio 2010 as of yet. We've just kind of got it back to where it needs to be for to get kind of parity with Visual Studio 2008. But the ability for third parties to extend this, the ability for us to take advantage of it in the future, it's going to be an amazing platform for us to do some really cool things with this to really enhance productivity. What we've done with it now, just to kind of give a little bit of refresh for Visual Basic, one of the things you'll notice right away is we've added type colorization. So C# has had this since Visual Studio 2005, and in Visual Studio 2010, we've gone ahead and added that to Visual Basic. So all of the types that you see here now get this nice cyan color, so you can spot them quickly. It's much easier to read the code and see what's going on. Another thing that's actually very, very subtle, and I almost hesitate to point it out, but the line separators are just a little bit lighter. They used to be this jet black. VB has always had this problem being kind of black and blue, keywords and text, right? And so we had the line separators were also black, and it was difficult to visually see the code and delineate it very well. So we've gone ahead and we've made that a lighter gray, and we've added to the tools options dialog, so you can change all these colors if you want to. Now, one of the kind of I want to say the flagship features you always want to show on that to prove that this is really WPF is the zoom feature. So I can zoom it up to 400% if that's really what I want to do. But you can now zoom the editor. You can use Control and mouse wheel on your mouse. I actually don't have a mouse up here right now, so I can't do that. But you can see the smooth scrolling of this. And if you ever need to get back, there's a zoom indicator down at the very bottom left-hand corner. then you just get it back at 100%. So in the past, you've had to bring up Tools Options dialog, load the Fonts and Colors page, which is notoriously kind of a slow options page to bring up. And now you can just zoom in and zoom out if you find the code is too small, or if you're splitting your screen and you're putting two files on the same screen, and you need to be able to see a little bit more, you can zoom out and see more on the screen. Okay, so this is one of these things that might be a little bit hard to discover, but it's very, very cool. So in Visual Studio, we've always supported what we call stream selection. Now this is where the buffer under the text editor, all the text is considered like a stream of characters, and when I select it, it selects it all in order like a range. And then we've also always supported, if you hold the Alt key, that produces column selection or box selection, like so. Okay? Now in Visual Studio 2010, when the editor team was implementing box selection on the new editor, they chose to also implement multi-line editing. So if I start typing here, and I realize that I want to make that raise that to public accessibility, or better yet, now I've got public fields, which is kind of a no-no. So I can also create a zero length. That might be hard to see on the screen. I can create a zero length selection, and I could just type property and use the new Visual Basic auto property syntax for VB10. Okay. That's right. Clap. VB is looking awesome in Visual Basic 10. All right, so I mentioned that the Visual Studio editor is now super extensible. We've added, in Visual Studio 2010, the extension manager. Since it's extensible, we need a place to kind of collect all of these third-party extensions that we're expecting people to write and our teams are writing now to add features to the editor. So if I bring up the extension manager, you can go to this online gallery, which will admittedly take a little bit of time to load. There's already a lot of stuff up there. So I'm going to continue to kind of ramble here in hopes that it loads up. But there's it's getting there. There we go. So there's already a good deal of components and controls, and third parties can place things up here. And we've also got several controls ourselves that we've already written. For example, I can enable this, and now I'm going to kind of do a no-no for a talk on a beta product especially of something as large as Visual Studio. When I enable an extension, it requires a restart of Visual Studio. So we'll just see. We'll just cross our fingers and hope that everything is good and that this won't take a long time or anything like that. But it seems to be back up already. So and I click the italic comments now. So now all of my comments are italicized. This is just a third-party extension that one of the editor team developers wrote and threw up. It's a MEF extension that you can. It's just a matter of X-copying that in. And all of my comments are now italicized. So that's just an example of something you could do with the new editor. Another example, bringing this IDE into the futures of multi-monitor support. We saw a little bit of that in the keynote, where you can now, you've always been able to take tool windows and drag them off and float them, right? But now you can also take document windows and float them as well. And then they also, in Windows 7, they work with the document wells that we have, the window wells and all that we have in Windows 7. So if I use the window key, with the left and right arrow key, I can also dock those, just like I can with any other window in Windows 7. One small change that actually it tripped me up at first was in previous versions of Visual Studio, if you accidentally floated a form like that or floated one of those tool windows, you could double-click to get it to snap back in. And that doesn't actually work anymore because we realize that when you double-click, you expect a window to expand to full screen because that's what normal windows do. But if you want to get back to that original behavior, hold the control key. Whoops. So just hold the control key and then it'll pop back where it was. Okay? What's that? Yes, control double click. I'm sorry about that. Thank you. All right. So let's bring up something else here. I'm going to use this navigate to again. And we're going to open up a file called Blackjack Game. So I'm using it's kind of a little bit for my talk. I'm using the Blackjack Starter Kit, which is also available in the Extension Manager, but we shipped that a long time ago, so hopefully it's familiar. But I'm going to use a feature of Visual Basic that's been there for years. Now it seems like I've met a lot of people that don't know it's there. It's the previous and next method. So if I hold Control key and go up and down, it'll move around between methods and properties. Okay, so I'm getting to this place where I want to be, and I also want to point out that you'll see that's highlighting right there. Right? You see the highlights? So in Visual Studio 2010, we have this feature called Highlight References, where if you put your caret on an identifier, it will highlight all the references to that identifier that are on screen. And we did that for both VB and C#. Now, but in Visual Basic, because we've never supported brace matching in Visual Basic. C# has had this concept of brace matching where if you put your caret next to the left side of a parenthesis, it'll match the other parenthesis and that sort of thing. So we decided when we did highlight references to add that to Visual Basic, but we went a little bit further. So any construct, like a while loop here, or an if then else, will also highlight all of the relevant keywords along with that. So if you've got some huge chunk of logic, you can make sense of it. You can see which parts, lots of nested ifs and that sort of thing. You can see where things line up. And then also, similar to the control up and down for next and previous method, if you hold control shift up and down, that moves between the highlighted references. So if I go right here, I can move between these with control shift up and down. All right. Now, while I'm in this method, I picked this one because it's got several sections of the code that are kind of delineated by comments. And when I see that sort of thing, like if I'm working in a language that supports regions inside of a method, I will generally turn those into like a region and collapse it and put the comment as the title. And Visual Basic has never supported these inline regions, and we still don't today, and that's unfortunate. It's on the list for the future. But there's a feature in the new editor that will allow you to kind of simulate this. You can actually create in the editor. You can create ad hoc regions now. So if I right-click, and hopefully you're all seeing that we now also put shortcuts in the context menus, which is awesome. It's actually working me out of a job, since my job is to stand up here and feed you guys shortcuts that you can't find. Well, now that they're on the context menus, I think this might be the last one of these I end up doing. So you can say hide selection. It'll automatically create an ad hoc region for you anywhere you want. You can choose something inside of a single line, a partial line, or a whole block of text, and it will automatically create a region for you that persists with your solution. Okay, so it's saved in the solution options file, and that you can copy that around as you like, and those will exist forever. If you want to remove them, it's Control-M-U and it's Control-M-H to add them. Okay, and then you can put a comment after that, and it's kind of like a little way of getting inline regions in VB without actually having them. Okay, so this is all good. This is good for visualizing code. That when I have my code on screen and I want to see the code, I want to make sense of it. This all is very helpful. But what if I want to see more of a higher level view of this code and more of the way of how the code interacts with other pieces of code? In Visual Studio 2010, in Visual Studio 2010 Ultimate, there is the ability to generate sequence diagrams. I can right-click on a function or a sub. I just say generate sequence diagram. It gives me several options. I got a lot of knobs I can turn with this. I'm just gonna keep the defaults, and it will analyze all the code underneath the hood, analyze all the calls, all the loops, everything about it. And if you're familiar with UML sequence diagrams, this is very helpful for seeing the logic of the code and making sense of something. If you've got something that's very, very hairy, and you're trying to make sense of it, just pulling it out of the code and getting a higher level view of that and seeing how the components interact can be a huge help. Additionally, along with that is the Architecture Explorer. And if I bring that up, that was on the Architecture menu under Windows. This is kind of a way that you can drill into this analysis that the architecture team has added. So I'm drilling into the class view, into card games. So this is very similar to the class view window already. There's not much different until you start getting into there and you start seeing like the calls that method makes. Okay, so you can actually drill in much further than you can with say, the class view or the object browser. You can get some analysis on top of that as well. All right, so I've been playing around with this quite a bit. I actually want to run this game so we can see what we're looking at. Like I said, this is the Blackjack starter kit. So I'm kind of a Vegas guy. So yeah. So I'm gonna place a bet 50, and we'll deal that. And it looks like there's a mistake in the game. Does anybody see that? It's hard to read. It says 12. Right, so there's actually a bug in this game. So I mean, an ace and a jack of where I come from, that's either 11 or hopefully 21, but that's a problem. So I want to debug this problem, but I actually, I need to start over, or I need to set a breakpoint and start drilling into it, because at this point, the application's idle and it's just handling messages. It's waiting for my input. So the call stack for where that bug was is long gone, right? Well, in Visual Studio 2010, again, something we saw in the keynote, that had a feature called IntelliTrace, which allows you, sort of a time machine, allows you to step backwards into your code, and it tracks all this diagnostic history of the events that have occurred. So if I click Break All, I can see the events that have occurred since I started. Here I clicked on the 50 button. Here I clicked on the deal button. Can you guys all read that? Okay. So it looked like, it came from where I hit the deal button. That's when I started seeing the error, right? So I'm going to click in here, and then I can go down, drill down even further into the calls view. So at the point that the deal button happened, there are all these calls that are related to it. So I'm going to go into the actual click event handler for the deal button, drill in a little bit further. Let me get a bit more on screen here. So now it's synchronizing back here, and the red marker across the code, the red line, indicates that we're now backwards in time. And then there's also this very cool margin over here that lets you step in and step around these things, and to visualize some of the data that it's stored as it was tracking this information.
Does that work with ASP.NET?
Yes. In fact, there's a whole slew of ASP.NET specific events that it tracks.
Only in Ultimate or other versions?
It's only in Ultimate. Okay, so the point I'm at right now, I'm looking at this code. So all of these functions are called from the deal button, but it looks like this might be the place where the calculation is at, where it's actually saying, is this a blackjack? So I'm going to drill into this, and then we see, here's a function called getSumOfHand, and I'm expecting this is probably the place where this is happening. So obviously I'm expecting this because this is a demo and I've done this before, all right? All right, so I'm going to set a breakpoint here. I see this is probably a place where that's likely. I'm going to jump back into live mode. Okay, so now I'm no longer in the historical mode. Go back to the game, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit that. So I get back to my breakpoint. And now I can start doing my traditional stepping through and figure out exactly what's going on with this problem. Now, one thing I want to point out, so most of us are familiar with data tips. They're very, very helpful to be able to hover over an identifier and see the value live in the editor. It keeps us from having to go to some other tool window like the watch window or the locals and see it right there and visualize it right in the editor. One thing that a lot of folks don't know or seem to miss is you could actually edit those values in there if you so choose, if you want to introduce some changes into the debugging state. But you can also, in Visual Studio 2010, you could pin these guys to the editor. And it'll scroll and stay there. Okay? Yeah? No, wait for it. You can also add notes to it, right? So this should be the result, right? Okay, that's cool. I could, if I wanted to, suppose I had some state that I wanted to just kind of see all the time, I could unpin that, and it will always be on top, even when I scroll. So I can come into other files. So if I was like tracking some field or something on some object, I could see that later. Now, what I find especially cool about this, I was playing around with it this morning, and I was talking to my buddy Chris over there, sitting over there in a corner working on something else. I was talking to him about this morning. I was like, man, this is so cool, because what I can do is I can set up this debugging context. I can have a method that I debug all the time, and I always need to know what the value of this is. And I can put a note there, and I can say, well, the value of that should always be this, or something's wrong, right? And it would be great if this persisted between debugging sessions or something like that. And the reality is that they stick. So they actually stick with your project. In the solution user options, if you in between Visual Studio sessions, if you come back to this, your data tips will still be there. So you can really set up some debugging context for this debugging, and it's actually right here in the margin. You see this little push pin, and it comes up and says, "Hey, here's the value from the last debugging session." Yes, sir. Excuse me? Will that carry over in source safe is the question. It will if you copy the hidden.suo file that lives next to the solution. There's a hidden file where some of these settings are stored, like breakpoints. And there's also a projects user setting file where some of these things are also stored. If you put those into source safe and introduce those there and allow all your developers to use those, it's actually a little clunky, because then they always have to be able to edit them, because Visual Studio is constantly trying to write them. But you can do that. You can achieve that. So. No, that's in Pro. Okay. So I'm going to move out of this blackjack thing. We've been kind of hanging around in here for a little while, and I want to write some code. We've been kind of just going through a ton of features here, and I want to write some code. So I've got a library here, and I want to write some code for accessing a popular online role-playing game on which I spend several weekends, and my wife despises. Okay. So the first bit of code I'm going to write in Microsoft tradition, I'm going to use a code snippet. How many people use code snippets? Few. Okay. So code snippets have a shortcut. In Visual Basic, there are bazillions of code snippets. We really went to town on these. And if you press Control-KX, you'll get to the snippet insertion UI, and that shows just a ton of different code snippet options that are available to you. Where you can just insert and then start filling out the form fields if you like. But also, if you can't remember Control-KX, because I never can. I can never remember the chords, right? Comma, tab will also get you there. I'm sorry, comma, I said question mark tab, my mistake. Will also get you there. So if you type question mark and then tab in the editor, that'll take you to the same place. Also, if you think you know the first part of a shortcut to a snippet, like, for example, mine is called Armory, I'll type ARM, and then follow it up with a question mark, and then tab, will produce the list of snippet shortcuts and pre-select the one that matches. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and insert this. And that's kind of our magic goo for searching this popular online role-playing game. Okay, so I'm going to type a function here. It's going to be a public function that we'll use elsewhere for gathering data from this. So we'll call it load characters. And I'm going to pass in name as a string, and then we'll return an X element. So this is going to use link to XML. Now, let me close the Solution Explorer. Right where there's a squiggle, there's a background squiggle, and that's expected. This is Visual Basic. We've always had a solid background compiler to give us errors on the fly whenever we need them, and also it gives us excellent smart tags for error corrections. Now, unfortunately, what's not as discoverable is that to grab these smart tags and open them up, you do not have to use the mouse. And also, unfortunately, in the Visual Studio 2008 and earlier, if you hovered over that to see what the shortcut was to open that up, it was like Shift-Alt-F10 or something absolutely difficult to understand, coming from the Office shortcuts. But there's actually an easier shortcut. It's Control-period, Control-dot. We'll open smart tags, and your caret doesn't actually need to be on it. I can be right there in the middle of the function and type Control-dot and get it as well. Okay, so you don't need to move all around. But I can then the error correction there to import system.xml.link. Okay. Now we're going to declare a variable called XML, and we're going to call our magic goo up there with the name, and then we're going to pass in a value telling it what we're trying to search for. And I'm going to return from this the value of X element parsing that XML. Okay. So this is cool. But what I'm going to do now that I've got this, I've got this library. I want to create some sort of driver, some sort of console app, because this is a good Microsoft demo. So we're going to write to the console. That's what we do. We're very good at writing console apps. In fact, the SQUIM data that we look at, we were talking about this. Sinofsky was talking about in his keynote. If you look at the SQUIM data, console application is like number 1 for created applications in Visual Studio. I'm pretty sure it's for Microsoft employees, just creating console apps over and over again. So I'm going to add a new project by right-clicking on the solution node, say New Project. And I want to show something else here that's brand new in Visual Studio 2010. Part of this modernized the IDE, and that's the New Project dialog. So we've done a lot of work on the New Project dialog. Now you can also get to the online templates that are part of the extension manager. There's sorting in here, so you can sort by name or by a default sort order, which we're kind of working on right now and figuring out what's the best order for these things. But also, there's this box up here, Search Installed Templates. And to get to that box, you press Control-E. Okay, that's the secret shortcut, the secret handshake, the thing that makes you the coolest developer in the world. Add new project, Control-E. Gets you up there, and then we can type console, and it'll show all the console applications. In fact, we did a little bit of extra work that if you just type VB, it'll just show all the VB projects. Okay, so we'll get our console application. We're going to call this wow driver, whatever that means. And I need to add a project reference from this to the other library. So this is, again, another Microsoft Visual Studio demo no-no. Do not bring up the add reference dialog. Whatever you do, the performance is just, oh, it's there now. So beta 1 happened, and we did nothing with the add reference dialog. Well, not nothing. We actually there was a point where the performance of the add reference dialog was slower than it was in Visual Studio 2008, and we corrected that. So, but it was still as bad as it was in Visual Studio 2008. And so in beta 2, thanks to customer feedback, it was actually a coup on Twitter of people just saying, wow, I'm sitting here waiting for the add reference dialog. And we heard all that, and we went ahead and fixed it. So the first thing we did was we moved to the Projects tab by default. Very often, the most common thing you're doing is you're adding references to other projects when you're setting these things up. But then the .NET tab now loads in the background while you're on that tab. So the add reference dialog it's not perfect, but it's much, much better. Okay? All right. So we've got our library. I'm going to add an import. Oh, sorry, we've got our driver. I'm going to add an import for this. Okay. Now, down here, I'm going to call into that function we just wrote in our library. I'm going to get that call load characters, and I'm going to pass in the name of a very, very good friend of mine, who some of you may have been in his talk earlier this week on Visual Basic, our Visual Basic language program manager, Lucian Wilczczyk. So I'm going to get all the characters named Lucian on the server, and then we're going to write them to the console. Now, I've got a special utility to just kind of dump objects to the console. And I'm going to use a new feature of Visual Basic IntelliSense called substring filtering. We've always had prefix filtering. Well, not always. Since 2008, we added prefix filtering to IntelliSense. So as you type, it filters IntelliSense down to the things that match the start of that word. But now we'll also do substring. So if I type dump, it matches object dumper. Okay? I can type dot, right, XML. So just a little bit faster, getting a little bit faster. But even further, you guys remember the camel case searching that I showed you in the Navigate to dialog? Well, that's also in IntelliSense now. So if I want to get to read key, it's capital RK. So if you do capital letters, you can match the capital letters, breaking up the words in the identifiers in IntelliSense. Okay, now let's set this as a startup project, and we'll run, and we'll see if the network, the lords of the network are with us. This is the tense moment. Oh, and my heart skips a beat. So we got our data. Okay. Now I want to. It's just a big bunch of XML right now. So I want to do some sort of query across this expression. I'm going to use a link to XML to query this data. So we'll call this variable called chars. I'm going to say from C in XML, and then I'll use one of our Visual Basics. Now this is from Visual Basic 2008. I'll use some of the Visual Basic access properties for drilling into XML and querying XML. So we'll use this one, which allows us to get at just a particular descendant. So we want to get to an element called character. Now, the problem here is that as I was typing that, I didn't have any IntelliSense. And that frustrates me. I like IntelliSense. IntelliSense makes my day all sunny and blue. So I'm going to fix that. And this actually exists in Visual Studio 2008, this feature, but I can get IntelliSense for that XML. I need the XML first, because I'm going to produce an XML schema for that. And if I add that schema to my project, the IntelliSense engine will pick it up, and it will produce IntelliSense for that XML. So I'm going to run the application to this point, and then I'm going to use the debugger, just grab that text. So to run to that point, normally I would just have to set a breakpoint, F5, remember to turn off the breakpoint, which I'll forget, and then I'll be hitting that the next time I F5, and it'll be very frustrating. But you couldn't just forgo the whole breakpoint thing and use Control F10, which is run to cursor, and that will just run to that point in my application. Okay, so that's been there forever, but that's I know from Squim data that very few people use it, and you will now use it, and it will make the Squim data just kind of go nuts. Okay, so I can hover over this, and I can see the XML text data that came down from the popular online role-playing game. Now to get that, I can't actually click in here because the data is actually too large for the edit field. But if I click right here, there's this little magnifying glass, which gives me access to the debugger visualizers inside of Visual Studio. So we have the ability to visualize data at debug time in special ways. So I want to get this text, and I want to load it in the text visualizer. So here we have all this text here, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to actually stuff it in Notepad and save it out so that I have it here. We'll call it Lucians.xml. Okay, and then we'll stop debugging, return to our application, and I'm going to add a new item. I'm going to add an XML to schema, use the XML to schema wizard. So press Control-Shift-A for add new item to project, and that brings up the add new item dialog, which is very similar to the advancements in the new project dialog that we saw earlier. So I'm going to press Control-E to go to the filter, just type XML. That filters down to what I'm looking for. I'm going to choose XML to schema. This is something that we actually released out of band outside of Visual Studio 2008, but then we included it in Visual Studio 2008 Service Pack 1. So, and this will take an XML file. You can either paste one in or load it from disk or even give it a URL to the web, and it will produce a schema from it. So we'll call this wow data. And I'm going to grab that file that I just saved to my desktop called Lucians. Press OK. And now here I have a schema added to my project that was inferred from that XML file. So if I just to view that, you can see all of the schema data. Now, if I come back to type my query again, from C in XML, and now I have IntelliSense, and I feel all better, and my day is sunny and blue. Okay. Oh, I forgot to put a line continuation character. If you were at Lucian's talk, you know that we removed that in Visual Basic 10. Not really removed. It's still there, secretly hidden somewhere. But in general practice, you very rarely ever have to use it. In almost every case where a line continuation character was required before, it's just not. So we can infer that it should be there. Okay. So I want to put some sort of filter on this. I think I'm going to search for his faction, and I think I want to get only the evil Lucians. Okay. I'll run that. We'll see that now we still have a big blob of XML data. It's giving me just the guys from the horde, but I could visualize this a bit better. So I'm going to project this into an anonymous type. So we'll say select new with, just to give us just a couple of the properties. We don't need all this data. So I'm going to give it the name. And again, I'm getting all this great IntelliSense in the XML. Race. And we'll give the realm, so the server that this character is from. Okay. Run this, and this should give us a much better view of what we're looking at. Okay. Now, suppose for a second that I'm sitting here and I'm building this application up. I'm building up this code, and I decide, I'm trying to build some sort of library here. Maybe I should take this, and this code works really well. Maybe I should take it and extract it into another method that takes like a name, and I can get back, some sort of projection of that data, something that looks nice. But the problem here is that I'm using an anonymous type. Anonymous types are great for projecting data, for using as keys in dictionaries and those sorts of things. But when it comes time then to expose that in an API, you can't because it's anonymous. It doesn't have a name. So it can't be expressed in code. So you could do some really wacky things to try and get around that. That's not, probably not best. What really ends up happening is you end up having to take the time to produce a new type, right, that looks like the one that you created here, and use that instead. And that can be kind of frustrating to do. But in Visual Studio 2010, we added a feature called Generate from Usage, which allows you for an identifier that's not, to use some compiler terminology here, for an identifier that's not bound, for which there's no, that does not exist, okay, for something that doesn't exist, we will take and try and figure out what you're trying to do with that symbol and offer suggestions to generate either a class or a method or a property for that. So if I just come in here and type a new name, like character, okay? Now there's a squiggle under that. And in previous versions of Visual Studio, if you brought up the smart tag, you would get the horrible no suggestions available, right? Which is always frustrating. But instead, if I press Control dot, now we offer to generate a class called character for you. Press Enter, and it's done. Right? If I go to, actually, let me just go to the Solution Explorer and show you that it's created a new file called character, and inside there is a character with all the properties, auto properties for the values now that were inside of that. So we can name anonymous types. I can run. Should still work just as before. But now I can extract that into an API. So I've been using this. There's several ways you might want to use this feature. A lot of people are using it in test-driven development or test-first styles of development. I also use it for convenience in places like this where I realize, oh, I need a new field. And so I just type a name and say generate field and pop up a field up there and it'll get the type for you. So this is a fantastic feature. It really fits, I think, that VB workflow. So take advantage of that. If you are the kind of person that does do a test-first style development, sometimes you run in places where IntelliSense will step on your toes. The canonical example is, for example, if I have a test fixture, maybe I have an NUnit or an MS test text fixture that's called like customer tests. And inside there, I create my first test, and I use my customer class before I ever declared customer. And when I press space after typing customer, it commits customer tests, right? Because there's no customer that exists, but it matched customer tests. In Visual Studio 2010, if you do that style of development and you run into those problems, there's a new mode for IntelliSense called suggestion mode, where it will not commit on those types of characters. So if I flip into suggestion mode, I can use Control-Alt-Space, or also under the IntelliSense menu, there's a button here called Toggle Completion Mode. And when I'm in the suggestion mode, if I'm down here and I type something like, let's see, dim C, let me get as new. And right now you see that there's a special window on top. Now we've always had this in Visual Basic, but we always flipped into it intentionally in certain locations in your code. Now you can automatically turn this on. And as I type this, if I type let me see, if I type something like CH, right now if I press space, it would not insert char. Okay, it would keep that identifier. If I still wanted to insert char, I could use tab. Okay, so there's a new mode for IntelliSense if you do these consume first or test first styles of development. All right. I'm going to flip back to slides here. We've just got a couple of minutes left. So some of the things we looked at the modernizing the IDE. I don't want to really just roll through all these slides, but they're here for you if you want to download them after the event. They'll be there for you to download if you missed. I mean, I went through these very quickly, and so I rattled off a lot of shortcuts. So if you want to grab some of these shortcuts, they're available on the slides. So we talked about the smart page enhancements, the new project dialog, that Control E being very key to that one, and the extension manager. We talked about the multi-monitor support, the new editor. We also looked at some deep insight tools, so the Architecture Explorer, the sequence diagrams. We looked at some ways to understand source better when debugging and to understand source when you're looking at it in coding. And then finally, some of the things we just saw, like consume first development, and some of the things that are available for that, generate from usage, and the suggestion mode. So some related sessions. This actually doesn't matter because mine is the last on this list. It does matter, though, because all of these are available for download, so you can view them online. So these are members of the language team. If you didn't see Lucian's talk there in the middle, that's a great talk for Visual Basic developers showing all the new language features. Some resources for Visual Basic, the VB Dev Center and the forums and some of those places. Also, if anybody would like my email, you can come up afterwards, grab a card, but it's dustinca@microsoft.com if you have any questions. And then finally, fill out your evals. We need your feedback. I want feedback on if we're doing the right things, if we're making the right choices for Visual Basic and the feature set that we've given you in Visual Studio 2010. So with that, you can learn more on Channel 9. Thank you very much. The mics are here for questions, so if you have a question, feel free to come on up. But with that, thank you very much. So the question is there a place that you can go to see the differences between professional, premium, and ultimate as far as Visual Basic goes. As far as Visual Basic goes, the differences, there aren't any differences as far as like the language of Visual Basic. There's not going to be any differences between those versions. If you get to the bottom professional, that you'll have everything of Visual Basic. Now, some of the features that I showed in this talk are only available in those. So like IntelliTrace is only available in Ultimate, for example. And the Architecture Explorer is only available in Ultimate. However, there is a link. There are links on Dev Center, which is, go to msdn.com, and if you go to the left-hand side, there's Visual Studio. If you go there, you will find all of the information. You'll see a feature matrix for the various SKUs. Okay? Any other questions? All right, thanks very much, guys.